Hey guys, Dazzler Magic here, and hey, I do still exist. I'm not dead. What do you know? In other news, Oracle updates. You know how when they release a new set, they tend to do Oracle updates? Well, these days, of a card in the set that they should have caught during playtesting, design, or writing it, or editing, or anything. But guys, we see typos on cards. You think they're going to also figure out if the card works correctly? Come on. But this time around, instead of, queuing up a whole bunch of Oracle updates for older cards as well and dumping them on us, we only had this one, Strangling Grasp, and that's it. So, well, no sense making a whole video on it, because honestly, I think the last one had like 10 updates. So, Strangling Grasp received a minor wording update to make it clearer that the player that sacrifices a permanent will still lose one life. Now, that's not even the way I read it during spoilers, so... yeah, I mean, if you read carefully, you're like, oh, okay, but it's not obvious. So they're obviously talking about the backside Strangling Grasp, by the way. So this is nice because other cards work exactly the opposite way. So it used to say enchant creature or planeswalker and opponent controls at the beginning of your upkeep. Enchanted permanent's controller sacrifices a non-land permanent and loses one life. So they changed the ending to permanent's controller sacrifices a non-land permanent, then that player loses one life. I mean, it's not like it said or before. I guess this kind of clarified it. I would have maybe phrased it differently, but it's just nice. What's not nice is that every single printed version of this in paper is now wrong, basically. I mean, it's not like it was supposed to say 2 life and it says 1 or something, but like, when are they going to learn to be a little bit more careful? This is like Nintendo 64 cartridges with no web updates, no game patches, no day one, 1.1 get it out of functional beta mode patch, none of that. You had to get it right. So, because you had to get it right and there wasn't no leeway, video game companies would actually test their stuff before it comes out. Well, I don't know if you knew this or not, but you can't update the wording, the actual ink on paper cards. So, I mean, this absolute string of laziness, carelessness, and stupid, needless Oracle updates on day one started, as far as I know, with Hostage Taker. The card could target itself, so they made a functional change where it could not target itself. But anybody looking at the card, or anybody who owned the card in paper in person, had an incorrect version of the card, and they had no way of knowing that they had an incorrect card. It's not like the card flashes, update required, it's paper. So I'd say, hey, Wizards, you really need to be more careful, but they really need to fire Mark Rosewater, and that didn't happen, so if they're not even willing to take that obvious step, forget it. We're just going to keep seeing this. They're just lazy, they rush everything, and then they leave to go bitch at people on Twitter instead of doing their job. Typical entitled Seattle douchebags. So next up, the more exciting part, rules changes. So I haven't actually looked at these yet, but they did categorize them, which is nice. So they have new keyword abilities, which, duh. So 702.146, 45, and 47, I don't know why they put them in that order. So they covered Disturb, Decayed, and Daybound and Nightbound. And if you thought, hey, we're probably circling back to that one, oh yes, 502.2 and .2a, day and night designations. You might think, oh, it introduces, what day and night mean and when to track them and all the other words. Not exactly, not in this one. Believe it or not, and they had to actually scramble to release this on like day 1 or 2, I think, of the release, was it? Because Two-Headed Giant happens all the time at pre-release. It's like my favorite format to play besides Sealed. And, well, technically we usually play Two-Headed Giant Sealed. Yeah, these are new rules that explain the turn-based actions that cause the game to become day or night. Pardon my sore throat still. My lungs are on fire, and the last week has been absolute hell. Anyway, a new sub-rule explains how this works in formats like with shared turns like Two-Headed Giant. Sure as hell can't read either, apparently. But I really need to get this done and get some damn sleep. It has not been a fun weekend. As you may have noticed during my last live stream, I was not all there. I'm surprised I didn't fall asleep on live stream again. Anyway, Rule 724 outlines what day and night actually mean and all the other crap. And the double-faced menace is causing more problems. Oh god, should I just skip this whole section? 202.3b, this rule explains that the mana value on the back face of a transforming double face card, compared to a modal double face card, by the way, is based on the mana cost of its front face. Prior to this update, and they are completely correct here, it referenced only permanents. Now, thanks to the Disturb mechanic, it also includes spells. You would think they could have looked forward a little bit and kind of predicted that. But then I thought, aren't some of them spells on both sides? My guess is no. I guess like it's not really a creature spell because it has no casting cost. And the other ones we had were lands on the other side. So, oh, and the modal DFCs, the ones that we can choose, are all lands or land spell hybrids. So yeah, we actually have not had this yet, believe it or not. Wow. So then we got the very similar 712.4b. This new double face card subrule explains the characteristics of a spell with its back face up and what happens if you copy a spell with its back face up and just all this functional stuff that you probably would have assumed, but it's nice to have it, down. They say these both mirror the behaviors of double face cards that are back face up on the battlefield. So in other words, it works both ways, and the way that they're handling double-sided cards right now, there's some really funny rules involving them in case you haven't heard them. It's actually surprising that they did anything logical, consistent, or expected. So then we got 712.7 and 7b, and then they say this rule. Well, is it a rule, or is it a sub-rule, or is it 2 paragraphs, or what? I would check, but I think they literally just meant to say these rules, but anyway. It used to say that a transforming double-face card that is cast as a spell is put onto the stack with its front face up with the introduction of the disturb mechanic. However, this isn't always true. Well, yeah, obviously. The rule now also allows spells to be cast transformed and thus have their back face up on the stack. Okay, you don't put a card on the stack, you put a spell on the stack. So that was completely not only incorrect but unnecessary. So saying a spell is, quote, backside facing up, no, you cast the spell on the back on the card and then the card is irrelevant when it goes onto the stack because you can't flip a spell on the stack. Because it's not a card, it's a spell. But then again, I mean, when it says return spell to hand, yes, that's a thing. It actually means return the card to hand, but I think that's like an after effect. I don't know. That's just the way I've been reading the rules for the last, couple years. That's why the spell's, formerly converted mana cost is different than the card's converted mana cost. Potentially in some cases, because a spell isn't a card. Or putting an X in the cost. I mean, that's more common. And number 712.9, this rule used to say that resolving transforming double face cards enter the battlefield face up, but with 7127, this is no longer always true, obviously because of both disturb and nightbound only, actually, because daybound, that's the default, that's the front of the card. And then finally we have 712.16, which explains why Mark Rosewater should be fired. Oh wait, no, it's actually just some more crap about this double-sided junk. It gets complicated. It's Curse of Leeches, it's an aura, then it flips to a creature, and they have to explain that, I guess. Actually, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so they say, this ability explains how to apply replacement effects that occur as this permanent transforms. Such abilities are applied while that permanent is transforming, not afterwards. So it looks like a trigger, it acts like a trigger, but it isn't broken apart, delayed, or put on the stack like a trigger. Which is weird, because like I said, it basically is a triggered ability, but no, it's a changing property. I mean, I would have gotten that wrong. So what they're saying is, so for example, when Leeching Lurker transforms into Curse of Leeches, you choose a player for it to enchant while transforming it. There is no moment in time after it transforms where it is not attached to a player. So it all happens simultaneously. Now, saying that makes sense, but looking at the card, not necessarily how you would interpret it, so I do like that they added the rule. And finally, we got the miscellaneous section. This is where we get the weird stuff. So, 601.2h, this rule was updated with Dungeons & Dragons Adventures in the Forgotten Realm. I guess they didn't want to tell us, to change the order in which costs with unknown outcomes are paid. In a small number of situations, the wording about hidden zones was a little too broad, so now that part has been dialed back a bit and refers only to random elements or moving objects from the library to a public zone. Oh, so this isn't new, they just rewrote the rule. Okay. I thought they were like, yeah, we changed the rule, but we let the D&D set be legal for weeks, but now we're finally fixing it. Okay. So, next up, 603.12, the adversary cycle of cards in Midnight Hunt have a triggered ability that allows the player to pay a cost, and a second reflexive triggered ability that happens if the cost was paid one or more times. The rule for reflexive triggered abilities, which is what they're calling this, is getting, I would call it conditional, but whatever, is getting an update to make sure this ability triggers only once if the cost was paid more than one time. Okay, so they forgot to specify that was a thing. That's actually kind of funny. It's the type of thing where nobody would think to do it until somebody thinks to do it, and then it becomes a problem. So they got out ahead of this one. If only they could put that level of foresight and wisdom and playtesting into anything they do other than the rules. like card design, for example. But anyway, next up we got 607.2D. Sigarda Splendor has a linked ability that requires you to note some information. Oh, yes, that disaster. And then take an action based on the information that was noted. Those abilities are linked, and this new rule makes that explicit. I don't care, ban the card, I hate it. Next up we got 700.5A. How Ultra the Pantheon functions was not well defined for some interactions. This new subrule for devotion makes it clear how an effect that modifies an object's characteristics based on a player's devotion can always see the increased devotion from Ultra the Pantheon. I don't really know what they mean by see, but I kind of get the notion here, and that's ancient news, pun very much intended, so let's move on. One thing I wanted to point out near the end here is there are no new subtypes in Innistrad Midnight Hunt. But they just came out and said it. So nothing needed to be added there, which is kind of weird. So then we've got 702.103C. Let me just read the first 4 words. When the bestow mechanic, oh god. Okay, so the bestow mechanic plus any of the crazy-ass double-sided state-changing, resurrected, conditional... Oh, then you got the, like, persistent, which they didn't even mention. Oh my god. A lot of really wacky, off-the-wall kind of, never been done before stuff that they do in standard sets really start screwing with older cards. And bestow is just another example. It can't be that hard to patch it up, but let's read what they say. It was first introduced in Theros, should have been back in Return to Theros, by the way. Copying permanent spells wasn't really something that was being considered for the purpose of the game rules. Really? I thought it was way older than that. Okay. Recently, however, we've begun to see Magic cards that do copy permanent spells. Yay, Izzet Guild. Hooray. And the interaction between those cards and bestow was unclear. It works like you would think it works unless you have evidence to the contrary. There you go, done. Wow, that was hard. That was so unclear. I don't know. I like clarity in the rules that you don't have to guess because this isn't the Pokemon TCG. So we're adding this new sub-rule to make it clear that a copy of a bestowed aura spell is also a bestowed aura spell. It's almost like you copy the spell exactly like it is on the stack because it doesn't represent a card. It's just a spell, and then you copy it with all of its known properties and make an identical clone of it. It is never different. Cue everybody telling me some obscure time where it would be different. Now get this though, its target won't change unless something allows a player to change its target. So if you're cloning a spell and then it says, and you can choose new targets for the copy, then you can move it to a different creature. Otherwise, it's getting bestowed on the same permanent twice. So just interesting to know, bestow is one of my top 10 favorite mechanics. I love it. I mean, Theros is one of my top 10 favorite places to visit. Actually, come to think of it, devotion is one of my favorite mechanics in the entire game. So, yeah, nice to see him circle back around to that. So that is it for today's video. Sorry about the lack of editing. I'm really hitting up against some time here. I actually had to cancel my trip tomorrow, which means more time to catch up on videos. Oh boy, I got actually 3 or 4 coming out for my EST channel. And Monday we're talking about here, by the way. If I have time, which that's a big if, otherwise sometime this week, I'm moving the stupid eating challenge / food review weird ass videos back to this channel because I changed the name of my, we'll just say second channel. I'm sure it's my 4th. I actually technically have 6 at this point, and I'm thinking about a 7th. I'm just trying to get permission to film somewhere. I guarantee my Discord channel immediately knows where. And oh, speaking of that, I might move to Guilded instead of Discord to do some kind of synchronization. I don't really just want to be like, oh look, I'm on 2 platforms. I want to get off of Discord because they're an awful company. Same reason I got off of Twitter. But in the meantime, you can still join by joining my Patreon, which I like basically never post anything to Patreon because people use Discord more. So if you want to support me, they're great. Otherwise, you could just join with a channel membership on YouTube. That's like pretty much the same thing. And then Patreon is just like the gatekeeper to my Discord server. My Discord server is my Patreon Discord server. Hopefully that makes sense, but if you're interested, it's really nothing special, but we have fun on there. Link to my Patreon in the description. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you guys next time.